Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm here today with James Valliant to discuss a topic that I have, a little bit to say about. Most of it is probably not family-friendly language. But yeah, before we get to it, I do want to say for people coming to OCON this year, the Daily Objective will be streamed live from stage at OCON at least 3 times on the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th of July. And also, this is not 100% confirmed yet, but I will hopefully confirm it in the next couple of days. In the week before OCON, there might be one live episode from somewhere in Manhattan with me and Jonathan Honing. So I will confirm that as soon as I know. If you are in New York and you're available to join us around lunchtime, that'll probably be a longer than usual episode because it's not a part of a conference. So if people come out, especially, we want to give them a longer show than they would get normally. So yeah, I hope to confirm that soon. But yeah, on to less positive.
Wow, how exciting is that? Great things are coming. You'll be broadcasting from OCON itself. You got to check that out, people.
Yeah. We have, I think the room we are gonna do it from in DC has 100 seats, so you might want to get there early. I don't know. It's during lunchtime, so maybe people will want to have lunch, but if not, then yeah.
Little things like eating, come on, you can dispense with eating.
Well, the lunch break I think is long enough that you can fit both in. Um, but yeah, something less life affirming than eating is
Yeah,
the Pope.
or much less OCON in the Daily Objective.
Yeah.
No, this is really, you know, we rely upon, some people rely upon, our culture in general, for some bizarre reason, relies upon someone like the Pope, the leader of the Western Catholic Church, as a moral authority. And his recent comments, I mean, apparently he gave an interview to an Italian paper last month that has only been published now recently, in which he took a morally disgusting stance, frankly, on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. He suggested that perhaps America, the West, and NATO in general provoked this horrific war of aggression that Putin started against a neighboring nation. He apparently extensively quoted an unnamed Western leader with whom he had a conversation. And he said that NATO was barking at the gate of Russia as if we in the West had somehow caused or provoked the war. Now, it's true that contradicts other things that the Pope has said. The Pope initially denounced the invasion, but now he appears to be taking a morally ambiguous, a morally gray, a morally unclear and pragmatic position, completely unprincipled position. But of course, this isn't uncommon for the Holy Catholic Church. They gave the green light 1,000 years ago for the Norman conquest of England. They gave the green light 1,000 years ago for the Crusades. They gave the green light for Inquisition after Inquisition. The Catholic Church is not opposed necessarily to horrific wars. Of course, the Catholic Church gave the green light for Spain to send the Spanish Armada back in the 1580s to try and conquer England and bring it under Catholic control. So the Pope is willing to endorse violence in history. And here we have just what you would expect. Moral clarity from the so-called moral absolutes of Christianity really comes down to a sort of a cult of moral grayness, sort of compromise with evil position that the Pope is embracing. Now, there's a political context to this in recent years, too, that has to be taken into account. With the collapse of communism in Russia and the disintegration, in effect, of the Soviet empire, Russian leadership has turned to once more to their ancient Christian Russian Orthodox roots. And Putin in particular has begun to attend religious ceremonies. He's wearing a cross frequently. He's, kissing icons and meeting frequently with the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, a guy named Kirill. And this Kirill has basically taken Putin's side. He's declared repeatedly that Putin's rule of Russia is a miracle, a wonderful thing that has happened to Holy Russia, the spiritual renewal of Russia, as far as Kirill is concerned. When the invasion happened, the Patriarch of Russia was in favor of it. Now, that itself has context. At one time, the Russian Orthodox Church was both the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church. You'll recall 1,000 years ago, when Russia was converted to Christianity, it was Christian missionaries from the Greek Orthodox Church, Byzantine missionaries that went north. Another guy named Kirill, by the way, who converted the Russians. And so Russia was basically an arm of the Eastern Greek Orthodox Church until, of course, the Byzantine Empire was completely taken over by Muslims, the Turkish Empire. And so the patriarch of the Greek Orthodox Church sort of took a subordinate position, and the Russian Orthodox Church gained a great deal of independence. Well, fast forward, as I say, to the collapse of communism and the reassertion of religion and nationalism within Russia. In the wake of Russia's first invasion of Ukraine several years ago, in 2019, the patriarch of the Christian Greek Orthodox Church in Istanbul, Constantinople, gave permission for the patriarch of Ukraine to set up his own independent branch of the Eastern Orthodox Church, in effect giving the Ukrainian Orthodox Church independence from Moscow for the first time in centuries. That rubbed the Russian Orthodox Church the wrong way. They lost a third of their flock in one fell swoop when the Greek Orthodox Church, in effect, gave the Ukrainian Orthodox Church its independence. While Kirill and the Russian Orthodox Church has very much embraced the nationalism of Putin, the new religiosity of Putin. Kirill has gone so far as to say that Ukraine should never be separated from Russia. It's God's plan, in effect, that Russia and Ukraine and Belarus are really all part of one unified Holy Mother Russia. It's God's plan that they all be united, very much giving religious ideological support and backing to Putin's invasion. Initially, the Pope, the leader of the Pope of Rome, the leader of the Western Catholic Church, denounced it, and it actually was personal about the Patriarch of Moscow, this guy named Kirill. He said, "Don't be Putin's altar boy." Now, I'm not going to comment on how Western Catholic priests treat altar boys, but it was quite dripping with irony. Dripping with irony, he said, "Don't be, in effect, Putin's lapdog," Kirill, leader of the Christians of Russia. He took that very personally, and he responded, "Well, in effect, you stay out of our business, Mr. Pope." And this runs against the current policy of the Catholic Church to sort of bring Christianity together. Over the last 30 years, the Church has been trying to, in an ecumenical fashion, reunify the different sects of Christianity. The Pope met for the first time in 500 years back in the 80s with the Queen of England, the head of the Anglican Church, for example. They made outreach to the patriarchs of Istanbul and Constantinople and Jerusalem. And so the Pope of Rome, the popes of Rome, the last 3 or 4 popes of Rome, have been trying to reach out and unify Christianity. So with this feud going on now between the Patriarch of Moscow and the Pope is sending out, I think, conciliatory messages, politically pragmatic, ugly, violence-endorsing messages, saying things like, "Oh yes, well, we may have provoked the whole thing." A meeting had been scheduled. One of these ecumenical meetings had been scheduled between the Patriarch of Russia and the Pope to take place in Jerusalem. But in the wake of the recent invasion, that was canceled. Now the Pope still wants to meet with the Patriarch. He has a new meeting for later this year scheduled. I think it's in September, scheduled, that he wants to have with the Patriarch of Moscow so that they can patch up their differences, in effect, and have some kind of unified Christian message about this. But in the process of doing it, I think the Pope is sending out an olive branch, if you will, by creating moral confusion over what should be a morally clear situation. I cannot help but comment that this is a classic example of, one, the church's so-called absolute morals, timeless, universal moral principles being compromised in the most ugly, pragmatic way imaginable. See, it's the other side, the flip side, the ugly pragmatism that comes from religious intrinsicism of the Catholic Church, for which they've been notorious for the last 1,000 years. But also in Russia, what you're seeing is a classic example of what Ayn Rand so wonderfully metaphorically called the alliance between the Attila and the witch doctor. Putin is using the Russian religion, in effect, to get the Russian people on his side for a holy crusade. And the Patriarch of Moscow, who apparently is getting $30,000 watches now for some reason on his arms, and is getting all kinds of official support from the government, is now becoming the moral defender, the witch doctor providing these holy Russia religious justifications for Putin's invasion. So it's two grim realities, in effect, working out. The alliance between mysticism and rank tyranny, which has been common throughout human history, and in particular, the history of Europe, as Ayn Rand noted, classic Attila witch doctor situation going on in Moscow. And then you've got the Western church, the so-called more compromising church, well, you know, the kind of compromises the Catholic Church has done in the last century, like collectively forgiving the Jews for crucifying Jesus, you know, stuff like that. The church is still very much opposed to individual freedom, reason, across the board. Ayn Rand so brilliantly pointed out the church is still heavily socialist in their leanings, in her criticism of the papal encyclical from the 60s, Popularum Progressio, and her attack on the encyclical about human life, on human life, that the Pope issued in the 60s. There's still the official position of the church to oppose abortion and birth control, even birth control. Even for married couples, birth control is a sin. So both in our personal freedom and economically, the Pope is for socialism, in effect, and for complete control by the government of our personal lives. So the Catholic Church has never been a friend of freedom, and they've always used mysticism as their basic justification. But in recent years, they've sort of compromised and tried to make rapprochement with the Western world, with modernism, saying that maybe even atheists could get into heaven. And so that kind of pragmatism now leaves this moral high ground of the church in ruins and tatters, as far as I can see. And this is just the most recent example. You've got the Pope actually saying that, you know, maybe the West, maybe NATO provoked the war by entertaining Ukraine's application to join NATO, as if NATO were any kind of threat to Russia. It's a purely defensive alliance, which has never been known for aggressive war. But here you have the Pope taking this morally ambiguous stance. And of course, a morally ambiguous stance is moral sanction for the horrors and violence that Putin is engaged in. So here you've got the great moral authority of the Christian West, the Pope, offering apologies now for brutality and war crimes, because he wants to make political good with the Patriarch of Moscow.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this Pope, by the way, I will get to the super chats in a minute. I think this Pope is considered a bit to the left of even his predecessors, right?
Yes.
And by the way, to his credit, supposedly, he's actually a more consistent leftist on this than most of the left, who seem to be siding with Ukraine in the war. So that's and you know, we've spoken about this type of victim blaming in the past. I mean, he has actually criticized Russia But this does sound like, yeah, rape is bad, but why was she wearing such a short skirt? Kind of,
That's exactly it. That's exactly what he was in effect saying. First, he said to the patriarch of Russian Christianity, "Don't be Putin's altar boy." Now, he, in an attempt to make political good with this guy, scratch his back and try and make amends, he's now giving this, well, yeah, maybe the victim was wearing a too short a skirt. This is the kind of moral clarity we get from the timeless morality of Christianity.
And yeah, there was, I think in the first comment we had in the chat before we started, somebody said, yet another reason to dislike this particular pope. And I think, maybe, but is it this pope, or is it the ideas behind, behind the organization that he runs? Before the episode, I was Googling Catholic Church scandals, and like Google suggests a bunch of different things, and they suggest Catholic Church scandal 2022, Catholic Church scandal 2021. Basically, every you can pick by year, because there's always something, and of course, some have been much worse than others.
Well, you see, if you have a morality that you can't live up to anyway, an impossible morality laid out in Christianity, a morality that is hostile to life on earth, a morality that says, in effect, you've got to sacrifice happiness in this world for the next world, right? If it's an impossible morality, you've got to be forgiving. You've got to be mawkish and appeasing of evil. And Christianity has long been mawkish and appeasing of evil. Yeah, the worst serial killers and torturers can get into heaven if they confess their sins and convert on their deathbed. That's the kind of immorality that the morality of the Western Catholic Church actually stands for.
All right, let's get to a few super chats. So Marilyn sends a poop emoji. Are you saying that the Pope is a piece of shit? Because and then Jonathan
says, being more subtle than that, Razi, I
think. Jonathan, by the way, some of these, I think it's a hippopotamus, but I'm not. Unless it's an important one, I'm not gonna try to understand what the emoji is. But he sends $3.99. Marilyn sends $4. Mark sends $2. Phil with £5 says, ominous parallel perhaps with papal pragmatism and collusion with the Nazis in the 30s and 40s.
Ooh. There's two sides of the Nazi Catholic story. There were actually rank and file priests and nuns who were helping out Jews and others during the Holocaust. And there were some Catholics who very much opposed what was going on. But of course, in official ways, the church was looking the other way for a good deal of it. And so, yeah, that's the kind of pragmatism that you often will see the church do to get along and survive. And, and as I say, in the current moment, under the pressures of secularism, the church is trying desperately to reunify and to bring Christians together. And so what we're seeing is a kind of ugly pragmatism coming out as it has in various forms since the Renaissance, since the Roman Catholic Church has been in slow ideological retreat since the Renaissance and Reformation. We've seen them engage in all kinds of ugly kind of moral pragmatism. But of course, this is the only thing you can expect from an intrinsic religious-based morality.
Bonnie with $2 asks, which room in DC? I actually don't remember the name of the room. I think it's referred to as the community room, but that's not its official name. But yeah, that's for those 3 days. On July 4th, I also still hope to do some sort of a TDO live. We don't have that room that day, but we will figure it out somehow. And yeah, I will. We will have updates between now and then. Roland with €4.99 says Jesus's advice to Ukraine would be to turn the other border.
Oh, yeah. For you see, the correct response, according to Jesus, is not to use force and self-defense. More than that, Jesus with turn the other cheek was quite clear about this. You can't block the punch, you can't run away, you certainly can't fight back. You've got to stand there and say, yeah, if you hit me here, hit me over here too. So yeah, Ukraine should have just simply submitted and buckled under, and they would have been martyrs, and they should have been proud of being blessed are those who suffer, because it's not about this world. They should love their enemy. They should submit to the evildoer. Jesus was perfectly consistent about this. So you see, the Catholic Church, in ever allowing self-defense, in ever allowing a war even in defense, has agreed, well, that is a sin, and you will need absolution, even for a self-defensive war. But yeah, we understand self-defense. And it was only Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century who even said that even when someone's coming after you with a knife or a gun, that you can engage in the use of force and self-defense. So even reasonable self-defense wasn't permitted to Catholic laity until the 13th century. So yeah, it's a giant contradiction. A Christian should just lay down and take it. He should, as Jesus said, submit to the evildoer, turn the other cheek, and anything that Christianity has said since Augustine and Jesus on this point for the last 15 years that contradicts that, they are perfectly aware is a compromise of their own morality.
I remember when Tony Blair was prime minister, I was still living in Israel, but there was a big terrorist attack in Israel. I think 20 people died in that attack. And Cherie Blair, Tony Blair's wife, had a meeting with the Queen of Jordan, like right after, it was an hour or two after, and she was asked about it, and she said something like, "Well, if people have no hope but to blow themselves up, then you're never going to get anywhere." So, and which is kind of why, when you ask why the Catholic Church is still relevant and why the Pope is still relevant, and so these ideas are prevalent even among non-Catholics. This is on the particular issue of Ukraine, most of the world, I think, gets it right, but not necessarily for the right reasons. And we still see countries that are like Russia, just not as big and strong, being treated as if they're legitimate, or regimes rather than countries.
That's exactly it. You see, you're willing to compromise with evil in order to achieve some kind of peace. The peace of what? The peace of living under a dictator. And that's the kind of thing that the Catholic Church has always been willing to do. If there's some, higher moral end, then of course people should be willing to lay down their lives, suffer, die for this higher end. Your life isn't your own. This world is not about your life and happiness. And no, of course, it's not a morality that you can possibly live up to. We're all inherently sinners. And so because of that, we sort of have to make constant compromises with, the secular world and secular governments. And that's the history of the Catholic Church, demanding the impossible, imposing unearned guilt on the one hand, and then on the other hand, issuing apologies for the worst kind of evils that have existed in the Western world for the last 1,000 years. Here we see it again. Maybe the West provoked Putin. Now it's true, Kirill shouldn't just be the altar boy for Putin, right? He doesn't like the war, I don't think. But on the other hand, is it worth really upsetting intra-Christian unity, or the unified ecumenical interests? What it reminds me of is the disgusting spectacle in my country after 9/11, when President George W. Bush appeared at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of Muslim leaders in this interfaith unity. Believe me, this has nothing to do with religion. This has nothing to do with Islam, declaring right off the bat that the ideology at the core of 9/11 was not responsible at all, making no demands of Islamic leadership to denounce this, as far as I could see, but actually sending out an olive branch to the very mystics and the very mystic ideas that are behind Islamicism and Islamic violence.
I just want to say, Nicole corrects me in the chat that the Blairs were Catholic, but I think the point is still relevant. I think
The
this is
Blairs were Catholic.
non-Catholics.
Boy, that's true. The Blairs were very Catholic. But the point is that even in England, where Christianity has lost its sort of metaphysical hold, it still has the culture in its ethical and psychological grips. Whether you're a Catholic or an Anglican or a Jew or a Hindu in Great Britain, Christianity is the dominant morality. And whether or not they are the most atheistic country on earth, Great Britain is still morally controlled by the vicious, unearthly ethics of Christian altruism. The only way I can understand Britain's so-called moral foreign policy or its dedication to socialism and the National Health Service, at least still in that regard, Christian morality still dominates in the West, even among the most secular, left-leaning Brits and Americans. Christian morality is still the ruling morality, and someone like the Pope, whether you're like the Blairs and are Catholic or not, is still a powerful moral force in the West. People still, whether you even look to the Pope as a religious authority with any real authority from God or not, he's still regarded as a moral authority. There are atheists out there who think that, popes are still, advocating the good because they haven't yet questioned the religious ethics. They may have questioned the metaphysics of their religion, but they haven't questioned the ethical values which have been ingrained in them over the last 2,000 years by Neoplatonism and Christian mysticism. And of course, more recently by Kantian duty ethics. So they've had ingrained into them this anti-worldly ethics, which even secular thinkers in the West have. And so they're completely disarmed. The patriarch of Moscow, Kirill, that we've been talking about, he says that the invasion of Ukraine is a metaphysical event, and that the Christians in the East have really a choice, a stark choice. Either you accept, gay pride parades and the toleration of all this immorality. They see the gay pride parades in London and New York. Well, this is your choice, Russia. You either go for the decadent West secularism, or you support Putin's attempt to reunify Holy Mother Russia. He specifically used the phrase, this is an invasion of metaphysical significance. So the Patriarch of Moscow is taking the more, let's put it this way, consistent Christian line on it. And the Pope is taking the classic move that the church has basically done since the Renaissance and the Reformation, issuing ugly, pragmatic justifications for evil.
Well, I think we know how we can counter that with something of real metaphysical significance, and that is by becoming members of the Ayn Rand Center UK. There will be a link in the chat, and you can join us for, first of all, you will be supporting us and the work we do, and you will be joining us or will have access to the sessions on the ominous parallels, which are relevant to today's topic with James Valliant. Those take place every Sunday. We are bringing back the Productivity Hub. Members may remember that. We are bringing it back today, this Saturday with Nicholas Krusek, who's going to do a session on Russian music. And yes, that is, I don't have the title of it in front of me.
There's one part of Russian culture I like. There's really
actually, that's also relevant to today. Yes, participating in that does not constitute an endorsement of Russia.
An endorsement of moral compromise like the Pope. No, that sounds exciting.
Something else you can join us for is the Fountainhead Book Club, which continues today at 7 p.m. UK time. That is 30 minutes from now. And we will be joined by Shoshana Milgram today. I believe we are wrapping up chapter 3. So yeah, it is still early days on the Fountainhead Book Club. By the way, we are intending to go through it very slowly. So you can join, you have access to recordings of past sessions. And if you're watching this show, you probably have read the Fountainhead. And if not, this is a great opportunity to start. We try to keep it spoiler free.
Shona is a brilliant literary analyst, a real expert on this stuff, and has taught this at university level. So great opportunity that you have there if you like the Fountainhead.
And in 3.5 hours at 10 p.m. UK time, 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific, we have Artful Tuesdays with Kirk, and Maria is joining Kirk today to discuss Sunday Morning by Wallace Stevens. That episode is pre-recorded, so don't ask them questions because they can't answer it, but you can still super chat, I believe. And of course, you can send super thanks if you're watching the recording of this or any other show on the channel. James, thanks. Always a pleasure. And we will see you on the channel again on Friday. And the Daily Objective is back tomorrow with a Jonathan Hoenig solo episode.
All right. Jonathan has been amazing burning it up on inflation in American media. So
yeah, and tomorrow I know what the topic is, so that is also, it's not about inflation, but it's a good one. So
okay,
tune in for that. Thanks. See you
thank you.
all next time.
Take care.